The average person opens their kitchen cupboard today and sees the same ingredients they have been cooking with for the last 10 years. Same oils, same sauces, same seasonings. They feel comfortable, familiar, safe. And their body is quietly on fire. Not dramatically, not in a way you would notice on any given Tuesday, but at a cellular level, in your arteries, in your gut lining, in your joints, in your brain, a slow, persistent inflammatory response is running in the background like a program you never meant to install. And the ingredients driving it are not the obvious ones. They are not the junk food you already know to avoid. They are the ones sitting in your kitchen right now, the ones you reach for without thinking, the ones that have been marketed to you as neutral, as natural, as fine. I am going to show you 6 of them today, what they are doing inside your body, and what to replace them with. And I want you to stay to the end, because ingredient number 5 is the one that will genuinely shock you, not because it sounds dangerous, but because of how relentlessly it has been sold to you as a health food. Before we get into the 6 ingredients, you need to understand what inflammation actually is, because the word gets used so often it has lost its meaning for most people. Inflammation is not inherently bad. Acute inflammation is your immune system working exactly as it should. You cut your finger, your immune system sends inflammatory signals to the area, the wound heals, the inflammation resolves. That is the system functioning perfectly. Chronic inflammation is something entirely different. It is what happens when your immune system's inflammatory response never fully switches off, when it runs at a low, persistent level for months and years, driven not by injury or infection, but by the food you eat every single day. And the consequences of that sustained inflammatory state are not minor. The world's leading medical journals have linked chronic inflammation to type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's disease, certain cancers, depression, autoimmune conditions, and accelerated biological aging. Dr. Frank Sachs, professor of cardiovascular disease prevention at Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, has described the modern Western diet as one of the most powerful chronic inflammation triggers ever identified in the scientific literature. And the 6 ingredients I am about to show you are at the center of that picture. Ingredient number 1, refined seed oils. This is the big one, and it is the one the food industry has fought hardest to keep you from thinking critically about. Refined seed oils, vegetable oil, canola oil, soybean oil, corn oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, became the dominant cooking fats in the Western world over the course of the 20th century, replacing the animal fats and traditional plant fats that humans had cooked with for thousands of years. The switch was driven by a combination of lobbying, flawed science, and economics. These oils are extraordinarily cheap to produce. Here is the problem. Refined seed oils are extraordinarily high in omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids. Omega-6 fats are not inherently dangerous. Your body needs them, but they need to exist in a balanced ratio with omega-3 fatty acids. The research suggests the ideal ratio is somewhere between 1:1 and 4:1 omega-6 to omega-3. The average person eating a modern Western diet has a ratio closer to 20:1. In some populations, it reaches 40:1. When omega-6 fats dominate at that level, they are converted in the body into arachidonic acid, which is a direct precursor to pro-inflammatory signaling molecules called prostaglandins and leukotrienes. You are not just eating something neutral, you are feeding the biochemical pathway that produces inflammation at the cellular level. There is a second problem with refined seed oils specifically. To produce them, manufacturers subject the raw seeds to extremely high heat, chemical solvents, typically hexane, which is a petroleum derivative, and deodorization processes that oxidize the delicate polyunsaturated fats. Oxidized fats, when consumed, generate free radicals in the body. unstable molecules that damage cell membranes, damage DNA, and drive inflammatory cascades throughout the body. Replace refined seed oils with extra virgin olive oil for low to medium heat cooking, and with ghee, grass-fed butter, or coconut oil for high heat. These fats are structurally stable at cooking temperatures in a way that refined seed oils are not. Ingredient number 2, refined white flour. Not bread, not grains, refined white flour, specifically the highly processed, bleached, enriched version that forms the base of most commercial bread, pasta, pastries, crackers, and baked goods. Here's what happens during the refining process. The wheat kernel has 3 parts: the bran, the germ, and the endosperm. The bran contains the fiber. The germ contains the nutrients, the B vitamins, the vitamin E, the essential fatty acids. Refined white flour removes both of them, leaving only the unhealthy starchy endosperm, which is then bleached with chemical agents including chlorine dioxide and benzoyl peroxide. What you are left with is a substance that behaves in your body almost identically to pure sugar. It is digested rapidly, causes a sharp spike in blood glucose, triggers a corresponding insulin spike, and when this cycle is repeated meal after meal, day after day, generates a state of chronic low-grade inflammation. A study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that diets high in refined carbohydrates significantly elevated inflammatory markers, specifically C-reactive protein and interleukin-6, compared to diets based on whole grains. The fiber that was removed during processing also fed your gut microbiome. Without it, the beneficial bacteria in your gut that produce short-chain fatty acids, which have powerful anti-inflammatory effects, are starved. Refined white flour does not just cause inflammation directly, it removes the very thing your gut needs to fight inflammation. Replace refined flour with whole grain alternatives where possible. Sourdough made from whole grain flour, oats, quinoa, brown rice, and legumes all provide the fiber and the slower glucose release that keeps inflammation in check. Ingredient number 3, added sugar, specifically high fructose corn syrup. We covered hidden sugar in a previous video, so I will not repeat the full picture here. But in the context of inflammation specifically, fructose deserves particular attention. Unlike glucose, which is metabolized by virtually every cell in your body, fructose is metabolized almost exclusively in the liver. When fructose arrives at the liver in the quantities delivered by high fructose corn syrup in processed foods, the liver converts the excess into triglycerides, blood fats that drive cardiovascular inflammation, and into uric acid, which is a direct trigger for inflammation in joints and is the primary cause of gout. High fructose corn syrup also activates inflammatory pathways in the intestinal lining, increasing what researchers call intestinal permeability, more commonly known as leaky gut, which allows bacterial fragments to enter the bloodstream and trigger a systemic immune response. A study from the University of Southern California fed participants beverages sweetened with high fructose corn syrup for 2 weeks and found significant increases in cholesterol, triglycerides, and inflammatory markers within that short time frame. 2 weeks! Check your labels for high fructose corn syrup and remove it from your kitchen entirely. It has no nutritional purpose that cannot be served by a whole food alternative. Ingredient number 4, refined table salt, specifically in processed foods. This one requires a distinction because salt itself is not the enemy. Your body needs sodium. It is essential for nerve function, muscle contraction, and fluid balance. The problem is not salt. The problem is the form of salt that dominates the processed food supply and the quantities in which it is delivered. Refined table salt used in processed foods has been stripped of the trace minerals, magnesium, potassium, calcium, that naturally occur in unrefined salt and that help buffer sodium's effect on blood pressure and vascular inflammation. What remains is essentially pure sodium chloride, often with anti-caking agents added. More significantly, the sodium in processed foods is not delivered in isolation. It arrives alongside refined flour, refined seed oils, added sugar, and artificial preservatives, all simultaneously. The combination creates an inflammatory environment that is dramatically more damaging than any single ingredient alone. Research published in the journal Frontiers in Immunology found that high sodium intake directly activates pro-inflammatory immune cells called Th17 cells and suppresses the activity of regulatory T cells, the immune cells whose job is to keep inflammation under control. Replace refined table salt with unrefined sea salt or pink Himalayan salt in your home cooking, and reduce your reliance on processed foods where the sodium is neither visible nor controllable. Ingredient number 5, artificial trans fats, and their replacement, interesterified fats. Here is the one I promised you, and the reason it will surprise you is not the trans fat part. Most people know by now that artificial trans fats are dangerous. They were banned in the United States in 2018 and phased out across most of the developed world. You probably thought this story was over. It is not over. When the food industry was forced to remove artificial trans fats, the partially hydrogenated oils that had been definitively linked to cardiovascular inflammation, heart disease, and stroke, they needed a replacement. A fat that behaved similarly in food manufacturing, stayed solid at room temperature, extended shelf life, performed the same functional role. They found one. It is called interesterified fat, and it is now in a significant proportion of the processed foods, baked goods, margarines, and fast food products that previously contained trans fats. It is produced by chemically rearranging the fatty acid structure of vegetable oils, a process that, like hydrogenation before it, creates fat molecules that do not exist in nature and that your body has no evolutionary experience processing. The research on interesterified fats, while still emerging, has already raised serious flags. A study published in Nutrition and Metabolism found that interesterified fat consumption raised LDL cholesterol, lowered HDL cholesterol, and elevated blood glucose to a greater degree than the trans fats they replaced. Another study found they triggered inflammatory responses in endothelial cells, the cells lining your arteries. The food industry replaced one inflammatory fat with another, and they did it quietly, without public announcement, without new labeling requirements, without the headlines that accompanied the trans ban. Look for the words interesterified on ingredient labels. You will find them in margarine, coffee creamers, biscuits, crackers, frozen meals, and commercial baked goods. If you see it, put the product back. Ingredient number 6, artificial food additives, specifically emulsifiers. This is the newest entry to this list from a research perspective, and the findings are some of the most significant to emerge from nutritional science in the last decade. Emulsifiers are additives used in processed foods to blend ingredients that would naturally separate, oil and water, for example. They give processed foods their smooth, creamy, consistent texture. They extend shelf life. They are in almost every ultra-processed food product on the market. In 2015, a study published in the journal Nature by researchers at Georgia State University found that two of the most common emulsifiers, carboxymethylcellulose and polysorbate 80, disrupted the gut microbiome in mice at doses equivalent to normal human consumption levels and caused low-grade intestinal inflammation, increased intestinal permeability, and metabolic syndrome. In 2022, a large prospective study in the British Medical Journal, following over 100,000 people, found that higher consumption of emulsifiers was associated with significantly increased risk of cardiovascular disease, one of the primary downstream consequences of chronic inflammation. Your gut lining is one cell thick. One cell stands between the contents of your digestive tract and your bloodstream. Emulsifiers appear to degrade the protective mucus layer that keeps that barrier intact, allowing bacterial fragments and food particles to cross into the bloodstream and trigger the immune response that we recognize as systemic inflammation. The solution here is the same solution that applies to most of what we have covered today. Cook from whole ingredients. Read labels on anything that comes in a packet. If the ingredient list is longer than 5 or 6 items and contains words you cannot identify, that product is almost certainly delivering a cocktail of inflammatory inputs that individually might be minor, but collectively are not.
The common thread running through all 6 of these ingredients is not that they're poisons in the dramatic sense. It is that they are inputs your body was never designed to process, delivered in quantities and combinations that your physiology has no evolutionary toolkit to handle. Inflammation is your immune system responding to threat. Feed it a daily stream of refined seed oils, damaged fats, high fructose corn syrup, refined flour, and synthetic additives, and you are not giving it a threat. You are giving it a continuous, unrelenting alarm signal with no off switch. The good news is that inflammation is highly responsive to dietary change. Research consistently shows that measurable reductions in inflammatory markers can be detected within as little as 2 to 4 weeks of removing the primary dietary triggers. You do not need a decade of clean eating to begin reversing this. You need a different grocery list. Start with the oils. That single swap alone, from refined seed oils to extra virgin olive oil or stable animal fats, will remove one of the most significant inflammatory drivers from your daily diet before you change anything else. If this video gave you clarity on something that has been quietly affecting your health without you knowing it, hit the like button and share it with someone who cooks for people they love, because this information belongs in every kitchen. Subscribe to Health Zone for more research-backed videos that translate complex health science into decisions you can make today. See ya!